Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to another edition of Premier League predictions. This time it is match week 13. Of course, Arsenal lead the way, sad to say. 29 points from the opening 12 games. Chelsea, Manchester City and Aston Villa are all in the top four. Leeds, Burnley and Wolves are in the bottom three. Wolves remain winless. They have only drawn 2 games out of 12. West Ham and Nottingham Forest are now out of the bottom 3. It is so tight in the middle right now in the Premier League table. For instance, Spurs are currently 9th. We're 3 points away from 4th. And we're also 3 points above 14th. So it's very, very tight in there. Now, 10 games take place over the weekend, 5 on Saturday and 5 on Sunday. We've got 3 p.m. kickoffs on Saturday: Brentford against Burnley, Manchester City against Leeds, Sunderland against Bournemouth. 1 5:30 kickoff on Saturday: Everton host Newcastle. The 8 p.m. kickoff on Saturday: Tottenham Hotspur host Fulham. And on Sunday, there's a 12 noon kickoff: Crystal Palace against Manchester United. And then we've got 3 games on Sunday: kickoff at 2:05. Aston Villa against Wolves, Nottingham Forest against Brighton, and West Ham host Liverpool. And then it is a huge game Sunday afternoon: 4:30 p.m. kickoff at Stamford Bridge as Chelsea host the league leaders Arsenal. Now, we're live on YouTube, live on Facebook and on X, so please do get your score predictions in for all of this weekend's games. Now, my name is Chris Cowlin and I am today joined by channel regular Gareth McGuiness. Gareth, how are you?
All good, Chris. Looking forward to the weekend's football as usual on a Friday. Have games in the morning with my own team as well. So really looking forward to the weekend's football. And of course, it's a big week for Spurs. We've got to put this home record to bed in the Premier League. It's got to start changing, and it's got to change on Saturday.
Absolutely. Gareth, before we get into this weekend's games in match week 13, give me your thoughts on match week 12. Of course, you know, we're Spurs fans. This is a Spurs channel. Let's talk about, you know, not for too long. Let's talk about that North London derby defeat, because no shots on target, no shots in the opening 45 minutes, an XG of 0. We broke the record again. No real attacking intent in that game at all. Of course, Richarlison scored a fantastic goal in the second half in the end, but that was painful, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was probably the worst experience of a North London derby I've ever been involved with. And I'm supporting Spurs since I'm 28 now. I can remember watching Spurs games when I was 4 years old, but seriously following Spurs since I'm about 7 or 8. So you're chatting 20 years. I can't remember a North London derby experience being as painful, because if you go back to, you know, even the days when Arsenal were the Invincibles and they were under Arsene Wenger, and they were always a team that were in the top 4 and challenging for leagues. You know, even then, I still felt that Spurs gave a better account of themselves than they did last weekend. We know Arsenal are a top team, but we've seen better Arsenal teams over the years, and we've probably seen Spurs squads with less talent than the one that we have at the moment make better games of North London derby. So, look, we know our record at the Emirates is really, really poor, but I can't remember such a lifeless, lackluster, absolute playing with fear on the pitch, and just basically just lay down for Arsenal. Once the first goal went in, you may as well have left the stadium if you were there, because you knew what was going to happen. You knew that Arsenal were going to steamroll them. There was a bit of a 10-minute spell after the goal where we kind of half threatened to get another goal to make it 3-2, but nothing of real note. But in the end, Arsenal were well-deserved winners, and I don't think Arsenal fans could believe how comfortable it was. And I think that's the most embarrassing and frightening thing about it, that Arsenal still viewed it as a tough game. And I think once the game started, they realised how bad Spurs were, that it was going to be an easy afternoon. And that's just inexcusable in a North London derby, isn't it?
Gareth, let's get into it. Let's start with Saturday's games. 3 p.m. kickoffs. We're going to start with Brentford against Burnley at the G-Tech Community Stadium. Brentford are currently 13th. Burnley are down in 19th. Now, before I get your opinion on this game, the home side has won all 4 Premier League meetings between Brentford and Burnley, with the Bees winning theirs 2-0 and 3-0 respectively. And Burnley have won 5 of their last 7 league games against Brentford, losing 2, just 1 fewer than they had in their first 21 league meetings with the Bees, winning 6, drawing 8 and losing 7. What have you made of Brentford so far this season without Thomas Frank? And of course, Burnley are down in 19th. Do you think they're going to go down?
Well, I think Brentford are. I mean, there's no real change with Brentford. I don't think they're missing Thomas Frank at all. They're not really feeling that impact. It seems as if it's been a seamless transition from
It's weird, isn't it?
Keith Andrews. It is, but in a way, I must speak about Liverpool that are on in the podcast. But if you remember last season, Slot sort of took over Klopp and there was no real issues. And, the issues are coming this year. Kind of what's happening with Liverpool this year is probably what you kind of expected last year. They happened to Liverpool. And Brentford seem to have really just seamlessly moved free. And I think the more impressive thing, not just Thomas Frank, but they've lost key players and they still are picking up results. Now, Brentford are one of many teams, Chris, and there seems to be a lot of teams in the Premier League this season that either prefer playing at home or either prefer playing away. And Spurs are one of those, and we'll come on to speak about Spurs later on, of course. But Brentford seem to be able to pick up a lot of points at home, but away from home, they don't really compete in games. So this being at home, I think it's going to be a tall order for Burnley. And look, I watched Burnley last week against Chelsea, and I thought that they gave Chelsea a real good game. They were probably the better team up until Chelsea scored, and Chelsea only finished the game late on, scoring late to make it a 2-0 win. So Burnley competed in that game. They competed against Liverpool. They competed against Man United. So Burnley have shown at times this year that they can make it difficult for teams, but they do lack that killer quality in the final third, and that's always the bridge, isn't it, for teams coming up, Chris? Is yes, they can be compact, yes, they can be organised, but do they have the quality when those sort of, you're chatting maybe 2 or 3 chances in a game, whereas in the Championship, Burnley were one of them stronger teams and creating loads of opportunities. So that's the difficulty with the Premier League. But I think all roads point to, and your stats back it up, that this will probably be a home win for Brentford at the weekend.
We're going to go for?
I'm going to go for a 2-0 Brentford 1.
Yeah, I'm going to go 1-0 Brentford. Next up, this one is also a 3 p.m. kickoff on Saturday. Manchester City against Leeds United. Manchester City at the moment are in 3rd. Leeds United are down in 18th. Now, Man City have had a difficult week, losing away at Newcastle and to Bayer Leverkusen at home in the Champions League. Leeds United have lost their last 3 games in the Premier League. Gareth, are Man City title contenders? Do you see them winning the league this year?
There's no doubt that they've got the ability, Chris. I think a lot of teams would swap their squads for Man City's squad. I mean, they've got unbelievable players on there. But I think the big question, and we spoke about it, Chris, was if Cowlin was going to have a dip. And what we mean a dip was maybe going a couple of games without scoring a goal, because he's scoring unbelievable numbers for club and country. And funny enough, he didn't score against Spurs in the second game of the season. Man City lost that game. He didn't score against Newcastle last week. They lost that game. He didn't start the game on Tuesday or Wednesday night, whenever it was there, against Bayer Leverkusen. They lost that game. So Cowlin's probably more important than Man City. In Pep's era, I would say Cowlin's probably the most important player that Pep's had. That they were always very much a team, and yes, they had key individuals, but I don't think they've relied on anyone as much as they've relied on Cowlin this season and any other season. So for me, they don't scream title contenders. They've got more than enough quality to be up around the top end of the league, but I think unless Cowlin scores at least 1 or 2 goals every week, they're always going to be struggling. If he doesn't score, where's the rest of the goals coming from? We were heavily linked with Savinho in the summer. Very tidy player, but output-wise, he doesn't really score goals or assist. And Doku's been in brilliant form, but was a strange sub against Newcastle, I thought, when he brought Docky off, even though it was 75 minutes played in the game. And yes, they were chasing, but Docky seems so much more of a goal threat than Savinho was. And when Savinho came on, I thought they'd lost that. And I never really fancied them to score unless Cowlin was going to score. So there is problems at Man City. I think with the consistency that we're seeing with Arsenal, and if you look at Chelsea, who probably haven't got the same level of player across the squad, but Chelsea have got more goal scorers than Man City. And no doubt that's why maybe Chelsea are higher up in the league table at the minute. They've got goals from different players of course, throughout the season. And of course, Cole Palmer's been missing, who was their main man. And there is talk he's going to be back this weekend. But Chelsea aren't relying on one individual, whereas Man City at the moment are. And that is probably what's going to stop them being title contenders and Champions League contenders.
Manchester City have won their last 4 Premier League games against Leeds United, scoring 16 goals in the process. And Leeds have lost their last 2 away league games against Manchester City, going down 7-0 in 2021 and 2-1 in 2023. Manchester City have won 23 of their last 25 league games against promoted sides, drawing 2. What a record that is, with their last such defeat coming at home to Leeds back in April 2021. What about Leeds United, Gareth? Where do you think that they're heading? Are they heading back to the Championship?
Well, I mean, he's seen the atmosphere and the scenes at Ellen Road last week after they lost to Aston Villa, and again, he couldn't have criticised the effort, the intensity. They were 1-0 up in the game. They were undone ultimately by 2 great goals from Morgan Rogers, who had a quiet start to the season, but all of a sudden now he is starting to play like the player he was last season. You say
that, but the free kick, I've seen a lot of people criticise the free kick with the goalkeeper.
Yeah, I think the goalkeeper probably didn't expect it. I believe that's the first free kick Morgan Rogers has ever taken in the Premier League, and he scored it. And it was a technique that Ronaldo kind of used to do, and Drogba used to do, and Gareth Bale, where he done the dip with a side foot. And I just think it caught the keeper completely unaware. But it's obviously something that Rogers has been practicing, because he went straight over to the set piece coach after, and they had an embrace celebrating the goal. So it's obviously something that Villa have been working on. And Leeds have been undone. And if you look at a lot of Leeds games, especially at home, they've been in all the games. I mean, against Spurs, against Villa, there's probably a few other ones on there as well. And they just don't have the quality. And there is a lot of talk about the manager's future. There was talk in the summer that they were even thinking about sacking him in the summer because of his Premier League record. I think a bad result here could be the end of it for the manager. And it would be unfair, because I think Leeds probably are where they should be, down fighting relegation, based on the player quality that they have. But the players are still fighting for the manager. So if I was a Leeds fan or a Leeds, I'm not involved in the Leeds setup, it's not as if the players aren't playing for the manager. So I would be hesitant in replacing them, because who is out there, Chris, at the moment? We're seeing a lot of managers coming under pressure, but there's not a lot of options. It just seems like we're, if a manager gets sacked at one club and then they get a job at another club, and it's a bit of a merry-go-round just to try and change something. But no, I think Leeds should stick for now. But I think this will be a very difficult game. And I believe Haaland's on 99 goals. I have a feeling he'll get his 100th Premier League goal this weekend against Leeds.
Certainly. I'm going to go for a 3-0 home win. What are you going to go for?
Yeah, snap, 3-0, Haaland hat-trick.
Right, the last 3 p.m. kickoff on Saturday is Sunderland against Bournemouth. Now, both of these teams have had good seasons so far. Sunderland are in 7th with 19 points. Bournemouth are in 8th, also with 19 points. Sunderland, have you been impressed with them?
Well, I mean, you can't not be impressed. They came out of the same league as Burnley and Leeds, and they've adapted to the league a lot better. Of course, they had busier summers than both those clubs and brought on a lot of players. But Sunderland in recent weeks have started to come back to the field a bit. I know they got a good draw against Arsenal at home, and towards the end they got that result. But away from it seems to be a struggle. I know they got that big result at Chelsea, but away from home the points aren't racking up. There's a massive reliance on home form. But I was reading on there, Chris, I believe the African Cup of Nations starts earlier this season. I believe Sunderland are going to lose the most players, and 7 players they'll lose from the African Cup of Nations. So I believe the African Cup of Nations starts the weekend that Spurs play Liverpool on the weekend of the 20th of December, and it could possibly last for a month, 4 weeks long. So that could be a really, really tricky period for Sunderland. So I would say the next few weeks they're going to really target getting some points, because this league, Chris, at the minute, a couple of bad results and teams are below you start winning, you start to drift down towards the bottom. So this is a big game for Sunderland on Saturday against Bournemouth. And Bournemouth, who had an unbelievable start, Chris. I mean, they were 2-0 down against West Ham last weekend. They were looking at three straight defeats. They were hammered at Villa Park 4-0, and of course they lost at Man City before that. So that was a big result to get back into that game and at least get something, a 2-2 draw. But again, Bournemouth away from home, you don't know what you're going to get. They're much more reliable at home. But I'm leaning on the side of a draw on this one, Chris.
As you mentioned there, Gareth, Bournemouth, the last 3 Premier League games, 2 defeats, 1 draw. Sunderland are also winless in the last 3. They've drawn 2 and lost 1. Their most recent game, losing 1-0 at Craven Cottage against Fulham. And as you also mentioned, Sunderland have a fantastic home record in the Premier League this season, because they are unbeaten at home in the Premier League so far this campaign, winning 3, drawing 3, picking up just 2 fewer points in 6 games this term, 12, than they did at home in the whole of their campaign in the top flight in 2016-17, and that was 14 in 19 games. Now, this is the first league meeting between Sunderland and Bournemouth since April 2017, with the Cherries winning 1-0 at the Stadium of Light to confirm Sunderland's relegation from the Premier League. You going to go for a draw?
I'm going to go for a high score and 2-2 draw.
2-2. I think it's a difficult one to call, isn't it? Do you know what? I'm going to go for a 2-1 Bournemouth win. I think it's going to be their first defeat at home this season. Semenyo again. Right, the 5:30 kickoff on Saturday, Everton against Newcastle. Now, what have you made of Everton and Newcastle, Gareth, this season? Because Everton are sitting in 11th, Newcastle are sitting 14th. As I mentioned at the very start, the league table at the moment is extremely tight. You'd expect Newcastle to be up there come May 2026.
Well, the problem, when we spoke about it at the top of the show, Chris, Newcastle are one of these teams that only seem to be able to get results at home. They can't seem to pick up any points away. They're on their longest, I believe, eight games away from home in domestic football without a win, dating back to last season. So, it seems to be completely. You watch the Newcastle team that played against Man City on Saturday, full of intensity, full of energy. Then they go and play Marseille, who are nowhere near as good as Man City, and they get beat 2-1. They were beat at Brentford. They were beat at West Ham when West Ham were struggling. So you just don't know what you're going to get with Newcastle. And I think they've got quality players, but it just seems to be two different, like watching 2 different teams, 2 different weeks. So if you get the Newcastle at home, away from home, they're a real force, because they'll not drop many points. But this is going to be a tough game, because Everton have been strong at home in this new stadium. And I have to say, Chris, that was a really impressive result at Old Trafford on Monday night. To be down to 10 men after, I think it was 13 minutes. Then they go on and win the game 1-0 with 10 men. And I have to say, they were comfortable. They dealt with Man United with real comfort. And, I think Moyes has been really impressive. I think, he went down there to keep them in the league, but you can sense that David Moyes is trying to get Everton back to where they were maybe 10 or 15 years ago, and being, not having to worry about relegation, push up the league table, maybe even try and push into Europe, one of the European places, because they've definitely got a lot more flair and a lot more quality than Everton teams previously. You think about Grealish and Dye, I think is a wonderful player. They just seem to have a lot more balance about them now, and they're a real threat, and they can score goals. So I think Newcastle, away from home, if they don't turn up, I think at all points then Everton home won, because they're a decent side this year, Everton.
They struggled a few years ago, Newcastle, as well, didn't they, when they played in the Champions League?
Yeah, maybe that's it. Maybe at home, maybe the crowd is energising the players and giving them that bit extra, because we do know that Newcastle have been kind of hampered by the new rules. They haven't been able to operate the way Chelsea and Man City could when they got new owners, because of the new, the new regulations in place. You can only spend what you earn, really. And Newcastle just aren't producing enough revenue to be able to go and spend what they have in the bank. So it's going to be it's going to be a hard process for Newcastle, and Eddie Howe's come under a little bit of pressure, which I think is crazy because I mean I think if Eddie Howe became available tomorrow, there'd be a host of teams, including England's national team, would be looking at him as their next manager. They stay in the job that long, and he hasn't had a lot to work with. He's had to sell players, they buy new players, and I think he's done a wonderful job there. But it just seems to be that the Champions League's catching up on him. As you pointed out, the last time in the Champions League, it was a tough season. They balanced the two, and it seems to be the way again this year. And look, is that the manager's fault? I don't think so. There's nothing he can do about it. He can only work with what he's got. But no, I really fancy Everton. They won this game.
Yeah, since Spurs went to the Hill Dickinson Stadium and won 3-0, Everton have been unbeaten in their last three. A 1-1 draw away at Sunderland and then beating Fulham 2-0 at home. And then, as you mentioned, that impressive 1-0 win away at Manchester United, going down to 10 men so early on. Last time out for Newcastle in the Premier League, they beat Manchester City 2-1. What a win that was for them at St James's Park. Now, after winning 5 consecutive Premier League games against Newcastle between March 2015 and April 2018, Everton have since won just four of their last 14 against the Magpies, drawing 4 and losing 6. And Newcastle are winless in their last 4 Premier League games against Everton, winning 0, drawing 2, losing 2, having won 5 of their previous 6 against the Toffees, losing 1. What do you reckon of this one?
I'm going to go for Everton 2-1.
Yeah, same. Yeah. Right. Tottenham Hotspur host Fulham at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium.
Your favourite kickoff time on a Saturday, Chris, again?
8 p.m. kickoff. I don't think anyone's a fan of an 8 p.m. kickoff on a Saturday. Tottenham against Fulham. I tell you what, it's an understatement to say what a week it has been for Spurs. We've shipped 9 goals, 5 at PSG midweek, 4 last weekend against Arsenal. That was a terrible, terrible display in the North London derby, one of the worst we have seen. No attacking intent last Sunday at the Emirates Stadium, but Spurs really did go for it, and that is what the fans asked for. We asked Thomas Frank to go for it. We certainly did, scoring 3 goals in Paris against the Champions League winners. It was a very, very different system. It was a very different team. It was a very different attitude from the Arsenal game to the PSG game. Gareth, what Spurs are we going to see on Saturday evening? What team would you like to see Thomas Frank put out? What formation would you like to see him play? We know that there are a lot of seats available for fans because a lot of people are choosing not to go to this game. A lot of people are trying to sell their ticket on Ticket Exchange. We need the crowd on Saturday. Thomas Frank needs the crowd on Saturday. And most importantly, Spurs need a home win in the Premier League because, believe it or not, the last time we won in the Premier League was the opening weekend when we beat Burnley 3-0. What are you expecting?
Well, Chris, just on the tickets, I mean, you should always support the club no matter what, right? And that is, there's no one going to be, even the people that are selling their tickets are going to be watching the game somewhere. You just don't switch off. But I can kind of understand that. I've been over quite a lot this year. Even flying over from Ireland, I've been to, I think, 3 or 4 of the home games. I've been to Newcastle away. I've been to the Super Cup in Italy. We usually watch the PSG game. And especially at home, it's mental torture, Chris, watching the games. It feels like you're in a prison that you can't escape because you're watching abject, sideways, backways. There's no invention, no creativity, no intensity. It puts you in bad form watching it. So I can kind of understand the fans that have just had enough. Just that going to the game nearly puts them in bad form. It should be something they celebrate, going to watch your own team. You should be looking forward to it. No one's looking forward to going to watch Tottenham play at home at the moment because the football is so poor. You could watch better football in the Sunday League in one of the parks in London because it's not just one game, Chris. We're speaking about struggling to get a shot on goal. That's how bad it is.
I was going to mention that because a few weeks ago, that Chelsea home game, which of course we lost 1-0, one shot on target in the first half. We came out, we 1-0 down at half time. We came out, didn't have a shot in that second half. The XG at the end of that game, 0.06, was a Premier League record. And then that first half against Manchester United, 0 shots on target. Of course, it finished 2-2 in the end. Last weekend against Arsenal at the Emirates, first half, XG was 0 in the opening 45 minutes, 0 shots, 0 shots on target, no attacking intent whatsoever. This has to change under Thomas Frank, doesn't it? Because I tell you, Gareth, the amount of managers that we have gone through, and it does feel at the moment like half the fan base have given up and they want Thomas Frank replaced already. The other half are sticking in there saying, don't be silly. We've got to give this man time. We've got to give him the players that he needs, etc., etc. And, I see it from all angles, because when you think that we are missing a lot of key players, especially in that final third area, Kulusevski, Maddison, Dominic Solanke, it would be nice to see him. With all of these attacking players, when they do come back, do you see a different attacking intent? Do you see a different Spurs under Thomas Frank?
No, I don't. I don't think much will change, because we've still got attacking, we've still got options there. And it's not about, like, if we were creating chances and missing them and you say it was a quality issue, don't worry, when Kulusevski comes back or Maddison comes back or something, they'll put those chances. We're not even creating the chances. We're struggling to get the ball from the back four and the midfield, from the midfield and the attack. It's very direct. I think it's 4 through balls we've played all season, and we've played 12 matches. This is not just Maddison and Kulusevski missing. This is a massive issue with the style of play, the way the team's been coached. And I think Gary Neville spoke really well on the Gary Neville podcast after the Arsenal game that, this isn't just today. We've seen this a number of times with Spurs this season against any opponent, that it's almost like they've forgotten how to play when they get the ball. They're so focused on being hard to beat that they forgot that you have to score and create chances. They won games. So that is a really, really struggle. We've seen before with managers like Antonio Conte and Mourinho. Yes, we had Harry Kane and we had Son. But yes, it was pragmatic, but there was a plan to attack when we got the ball. Fans wanted to be more on the front foot. But at least when we got the ball, we still had an idea. We still scored goals under Mourinho. We still scored goals under Conte. This is as bad as I can ever remember it being. Look, Chris, if this was happening at Leeds, happening at Villa, happening at Newcastle, no fan base would accept this in any league of 1 shot on target per match, or 45 minutes passes by and we haven't had a shot yet. That would be unacceptable at any level of football. If I was managing the kids tomorrow and we didn't have a shot on target in the whole game, parents would be asking me, what's going on? What's going on with these kids? Like, they can't even pass a ball forward, or they've no confidence to get on the ball and play. So this isn't just because it's Spurs. This would be at any level of football. No one would accept this. And in a way, Chris, Thomas Frank has put himself under pressure, because if we were playing half decent and you could see signs that we still got players to come back, he's only here 4 months, give him time. He's not showing us anything at the minute that he should get time. And I think that's a big worry. There's a January window coming up. Is he the right man on what we've seen to be in charge of, having a hand in the recruitment? I'm yet to be convinced, Chris. I do not see this working. But I'd love to be proven wrong, because I'm like you. I don't want to see another manager sacked and then we have to get behind another man. But it doesn't look good at the minute. Yes, Wednesday was an improvement, and I'm hoping we see more of that moving forward. But he's put himself under massive pressure, Chris, against Chelsea and against Arsenal, our 2 big rivals, and we put out those type of performances. If you think back to Nuno's first season, Chelsea and Arsenal is where he lost the fans. We were smashed at home by Chelsea 3-0. We were beat at Arsenal 3-1, 3-0 down at half-time. He lasted a few more weeks and he was sacked after a dismal home performance against Man United. There's a lot of similarities between these 2 coaches. Results, style of play. I think under Nuno it was 5 wins, 5 defeats after 10 games, and he was sacked. We're 12 games in, only 5 wins. So and again, if you look at the 5 wins that Nuno had, all in Man City at home on the first day, the other ones were kind of scruffy ones. Same with Thomas Frank, all in the Man City one. You could maybe give him Burnley, Copenhagen in the Champions League. The rest of them, we could have easily got worse results. So no, it's got to change, and it's got to start changing on Saturday. I want to see an aggressive Tottenham team going out to win the game. And I think, to be honest, Chris, Thomas Frank's got no choice. I think he's going to have to be forced on he's probably going to be feeling the pressure that he has to get the fans on side, because if he does get the fans on side and results are poor at times, but there is decent level of performance, you'll get more time and more sympathy. But not playing this way, you won't. And Jamie Carragher was right. the problem that Thomas Frank's got, if you don't want playing this way, you're going to be under massive pressure.
I'm glad you mentioned the word aggression there, because there was a complete lack of aggression in that North London derby, which, for us fans, you want to see, that aggressive style, especially in these huge games that the players should very much be up for. What did you make of the difference with the approach in the PSG game? Because a lot of people that, I was in the stadium on Wednesday in Paris, and the people around me, they were very impressed and very pleased with the reaction. Thomas Frank asked for that reaction. The fans have been very impressed with the reaction, although we did ship 5 goals against the Champions League winners. Some people have accepted the fact that we've conceded those goals because we showed that real attacking intent. Some people that I've spoke to, they said, well, what's the difference between Ange Ball and the game on Wednesday? Because we conceded so many goals and we conceded, we scored 3. Where do you see this going, Gareth? And how does Thomas Frank now? Because it's fair to say that those 2 games, Sunday and Wednesday, were like chalk and cheese. We went for it on Wednesday. We obviously went to Emirates on Sunday to just try and soak up the pressure and go for a draw, because there was no real attacking intent at all, particularly with the XG that I mentioned. But how does he approach this Fulham game? Because he desperately, as I said earlier, we desperately need a win at home in the Premier League.
Yeah, it's funny because you sent me a video before the game against PSG, the warm-up, and it was quite similar to what Ange would do in the warm-up.
Very similar.
And the defenders. So from that video, you could definitely tell there was going to be more of an intent to get forward. And you could see that from the early... I thought the first 15 minutes we were excellent. PSG were struggling. Probably caught PSG by surprise of how aggressive we were and how high the midfield was, and the wide players were pressing and stuff. So, yeah. And look, we had the legs in there. We had Archie Gray, we had Bergville, we had Sars, we had the legs to get about. With Palhinha in there and Bentancur, I don't think it's a good... You can't play that style of football, I don't think. It's always going to be about soaking up and being difficult to break down, as opposed to be able to go on the front foot. And if you think back to Wednesday night against PSG, we know that phrase in football, Chris, defend from the front. We haven't defended from the front against Chelsea. We haven't defended from the front against Arsenal. We've let those teams come on to us, push us back into their own half, and then we've got everybody behind the ball. And the biggest issue you've got with that, Chris, and I think Gary Neville said it in co-commentary, it feels like Spurs has 1-0 up here in the last few minutes of the cup final, because I don't know what the plan is here to try and score a goal. And he was right, because whenever we got the ball, we had no options, because everyone was within about 5 to 10 yards of each other. Richarlison was the highest player, and he was back almost like where a midfielder would be. So there was nobody in the Arsenal half. So it was always going to be super difficult to get out. And we couldn't get out, and we just resulted in a long ball getting lumped forward, giving the ball back to Arsenal. I mean, they were happy for that. Whereas against PSG, we won the ball high up at times, forced them on the mistakes. And in those first 15 minutes, Spurs were the team on the front foot. We'd kind of pushed PSG back. PSG are a top quality team, and they've got a top quality manager, so of course they were going to be able to adjust. And in the end, they had too much quality for us. But I don't think if Sunday hadn't happened, I think a lot of people would have said, you know what? We've went to PSG. We know they're a better team than us. We've given a decent account of ourselves. We've scored 3 goals. Could have scored more. And a lot of the goals were avoidable. You think about if we close Vitinha down, still a wonderful strike. That the handball with Romero I thought was harsh. We gifted them the 3rd goal. So it's not... There was mistakes in there that on an hour night we could have got a result. So I think the manager deserves credit for that, because at the end of the day, individual errors... The players have to shoulder those. You can't blame the manager for an individual error. What Romero did isn't Thomas Frank's fault. But
so does that give you a sign then, Gareth? Does that say to you that perhaps that the fan base ought to be a little bit more patient with Thomas Frank?
No, Chris, because in a way, nobody expected us to get a result against PSG, and he could not do the same as he did against Arsenal and Chelsea. He had to go about it a different way. So we're going to get an indication on Saturday with the team selection and how we approach the game against Fulham about how brave Thomas Frank's going to be, because PSG, in a way, Chris, was a free hit. As long as he showed some sort of intent, fans was always going to accept that PSG were a better team. If we go and play the same way against PSG as we do against Fulham, concede 5 goals, no one's going to be praising the performance. People are going to say, well, this is crazy. Conceded 5 goals against Fulham. So PSG in a way was a bit of a free hit, I think, for the manager, and he played on that. So this next game is going to be a different one. Look, we don't want to see cricket, high scoring games every single week, because you look at Liverpool at the minute, they're conceding 3 or 4 goals every game. It's impossible to win matches that way. But you have to find the right balance, Chris. Ange was too forward thinking and neglected the defence. Thomas Frank has took us completely back the other way. I can understand them because of how many goals we conceded last year. Of we need to shore up, we need to be defensively solid, and that is fine. But you have to find the balance, because he's completely forgot about the other end of the pitch, and now that's a massive issue. So it's all about finding the right balance, Chris. And my dad says to me on Wednesday night, thank God, he says, I've watched the Tottenham game for the first time in a long time of Spurs actually having a go. And that's what the fans really want to see. Being brave, being aggressive, and having a go. You can accept defeat in certain games, like PSG, but there's no reason not to be attacking Fulham. We've got better players than Fulham, despite our injury problems. Fulham are in a bad way, only 1 point away from home all season in the Premier League. They're poor travellers. This should be, in any given season, this should be a Tottenham one. But we've got this horrendous home record that needs fixing. But I cannot feel, Chris, that this is a massive game for the manager's future. I think if this goes pear-shaped and he goes back to Polina and Bentancur, I think it's going to be really, really toxic in the stadium. He's got to unleash the likes of Bergville and Sarr, and getting them running around on there, getting them buzzy, high press, winning it back, getting Kudos back into the Kudos that we seen when he joined. Kudos has went backwards because of the tactical system. We know Kudos is a good player, but he's not getting off of the ball. And when he is getting the ball, he's in his own half. So you can put Messi out there, and he would struggle because he's got 70 or 80 yards in front of him. So the manager needs to play to the players' strengths. Kudos, Xavi Simons, Archie Gray, Pape Sarr, even if it's Tell, Miani, Richarlison, they don't sit playing that way that they're being nasty. So we've got to start being a forward-thinking team, and let's hope on Saturday that starts. But you couldn't trust this group, and for me at the minute, I don't trust this manager.
Gareth, in a second, I'm going to ask you to predict Thomas Frank's 11, the team that you think he will actually name on Saturday evening. Now, at the moment, Spurs are 9th, Fulham are down in 15th. Now, as I mentioned, Fulham won their last game against Sunderland 1-0 at home at Craven Cottage. But as you mentioned, they are terrible travellers. We've got a terrible home record as well. No side have earned fewer away points than Fulham in the Premier League this season, which is 1, while only Wolves 1 have earned fewer at home than Spurs 5. Fulham have lost their last 5 on the road in the Premier League, last having a longer run between January and April in 2019, and that was 7. What do you think? How does Thomas Frank approach this game? What's the formation going to be? What's the starting 11 going to be?
I think he'll go. Well, Romero's suspended, so Danzo will play. So it'll be Vicario. Porro has to. Porro definitely starts this game for me. Porro, Danzo, Van de Ven, and Udogie. I think he'll go. What I would do in midfield, I don't think Thomas Frank will do. So I think Thomas Frank will go with Polina, Sarr. I would go with Archie Gray, Sarr and Bergville. And then the front 3, I think he'll go Kudos, Richarlison and Miani. And maybe Richarlison playing almost closer to Miani, but off the left side. But I would go with that midfield 3 of Gray, Sarr and Bergville. But I think he'll bring Polina back in, because Bentancur's played a lot of football recently, and Polina didn't start the game on Wednesday night, so I would imagine he'll bring Polina back in. And I don't think that'll help us in this game.
Gareth, it's good to see Richarlison on the score sheet in the last couple of games, and also good to see Randall Kolo-Muani scoring his first Spurs goals, ironically against his parent club, PSG, but a couple of good finishes there.
Yeah, and I think it's that trouble is always going to be for a striker getting your first goal. But he has looked bright in the games he's played. It was unfortunate he got that injury, didn't he? And look, big credit to him, because I've seen the players. We've seen Kulusevski wear it, and Kane wear it, and saw him with the nose. That one looks even more uncomfortable because it's right on his chin. Yeah. So credit to him. It didn't affect his performance. I think Richarlison plays because he scored 3 and 3. He's undroppable, really. He's got to find a way to put him on there. The one I think could also play, but maybe there might be a case for Johnson to get the ball into the box to the likes of Richarlison and Miani, but no, I think he'll go with Kudos, Miani, Richarlison. But it'll be interesting to see what he does in midfield because we know his two favourites, Palhinha and Bentancur. I don't think he'll play both, but I definitely think Palhinha will play and that Bentancur get a rest. But I think Archie Gray, Bergville, and Sarr's the way to go in this game.
Gareth, before we get your score prediction, I'm going to read you this out, and you might be surprised by this, given that we've been talking about the XG for so long. Tottenham have overperformed their expected goals more than any other side in the Premier League this season, netting almost 9 goals more than their XG suggests, 20 goals, and that is 11.2 XG. Their 0.07 against Arsenal last time out was their lowest XG in a Premier League game since September 2021, and that was at 0.06 against Crystal Palace. And of course, we know the stats from this season as well against Chelsea. What's your score prediction for this one?
I'm torn, Chris. I'm torn.
Do you know what? Do you know what, Gareth? It pains me to say this. I think this game has got a draw written all over it. And I tell you what, I will have everything crossed. I'm hoping and praying that Spurs do go and get a win. But I think that Fulham are going to make it extremely difficult for Spurs. And I think that the starting 11 will be very different to a starting 11 that the fans probably want. Thomas Frank does seem to play a very safe way, especially at home in the Premier League. And I think he's got a 1-1 draw written all over it. But honestly, my heart, it just says, come on, Tottenham, go for it.
I have a feeling we're going to follow the line in this game. We let go and won unconvincingly, 2-1. And yes, it's a result, but I mean, I would just love us to go out and play really attacking football, but I just don't think, I think it's going to be nervy, cagey. I think the fans is going to be on the players' backs if we don't start attacking from the off. And I think it'll be uncomfortable at times, but I think we'll find a way. Maybe if my set piece or something. 2-1 Spurs.
2-1. Let's go with it. I'll go the same. 2-1 Spurs. Yeah. You've talked me into it.
Yeah.
Last question on
Chris, before I say that, sorry, as much as a result is important, I would like to see a performance, but if we follow the line with 2 shots on target with 2 goals, it's not going to convince you for games coming up that anything's going to change. So I would love to see a Spurs like Copenhagen. I know Copenhagen aren't but against Copenhagen we could have scored 10. I don't want to be talking about that after the game. We won 2-1, but we could have scored 10. Not sitting there 2-1 and going, geez, that was lucky, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's funny you should mention that because I've heard a lot of people and also seen a lot of these sorts of arguments or debates, if you want to call them that, online about people saying, well, tell me, what you're seeing, why you're having confidence with Thomas Frank going forward, because you want to see that attacking intent. You want to have that moment. Some people are talking about that Thomas Frank had that Mauricio Pochettino moment on Wednesday against PSG. I'm not really buying that, if I'm honest.
No chance. It needs to be a lot more to convince me. He can be the next Pochettino. A lot more.
Yeah. In terms of league position, very quickly, what would be a successful season for Tottenham? Has your expectation lowered?
At the start, definitely. I think at the start of the season, I expect us to be top 6, at the very least. At the minute, I'm struggling to see how we finish above some of the teams that are competing for those positions. So, I mean, anything lower than that, I think his position's untenable. I think if he finishes 10th, then see you later, out the door. Not good enough. And that might only be one season, but I could accept finishing 10th if we were attacking, looking like a team that could improve. Seeing Pochettino's first season, we finished 5th. We a lot of problems that season. A lot of players moved on. A lot of young players were in the team, and you could see signs that he was building a team. I haven't seen anything from Thomas Frank to convince me if we finish 8th, 9th, 10th that he should be given more time. I really don't. And I don't expect, Chris, I'll go big and bold here, but I don't expect Thomas Frank to be our manager after Christmas. I think he'll be gone by the new year.
Well, we do have another very busy and tough week coming up because, of course, Fulham on Saturday night, and then it's Newcastle away at St James's Park on Tuesday evening. That is going to be a very tough game, and then followed by another home game for Spurs, Brentford at home on Saturday. So, none of these games are easy in the Premier League.
If we don't beat Fulham and Brentford at home, That's it, I think, because it will not. Well, I don't expect us to get anything. It's James's Park, just purely the fact that they won most of their home games anyway. I think that's always a tough place to go. But if we don't beat Fulham and Brentford at home, I think that'll be it, because I don't see where the process continues after that, because that's another 2 games at home we had to win, and the fans will be going mad, and the style of football is not great, and I think his position will just become untenable. So he's got to win these next 2 home games for me.
So Gareth and I have gone for a 2-1 home win for Tottenham. Everything crossed, and as we both said, we want to see a good performance, and 3 points would be very, very welcome, particularly as we haven't won a Premier League game at home at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium since the opening weekend against Burnley. Please do let us know your score predictions in the comments section below. Right, Gareth, let's move on to Sunday's games. 5 games take place on Sunday in the Premier League. There's a 12 noon kickoff. Crystal Palace take on Manchester United. Of course, every single time I talk to you, we're always praising Oliver Glasner and the work that he is doing at Selhurst Park.
Yeah, fantastic what he's doing. But that difficult result on Thursday night against Strasbourg, and I think they probably struggled to compete with the 2 competitions because they haven't got the biggest squad. But in the league, their form's been unbelievable. There's a lot of. It's funny that they're playing Man United, because there's been a lot of people criticising Amram's system. It's very similar formation to what Oliver Glasner does, and Oliver Glasner's system works. So, is it the system, or is it the man that's implementing the system that's the problem? Because Crystal Palace have no problem with a back 3. Man United do. This will be a fascinating game, because the 2 teams are the only 2 teams in the league that play with 3 at the back consistently. So it's the battle of the managers with the back 3. So I think this will be an absolutely tremendous watch. I'm looking forward to this. But Oliver Glasner's stock couldn't be higher. I think Crystal Palace have got to do something to keep him there. All unlikely Gahey moves on. Probably not in January, but at the end of the season, he's going to be a huge loss for them. And Glasner was very, very, He was upset at the thought of Gahey leaving last summer. Managed to convince him to stay for another season as he's moved on. And I think Oliver Glasner sees himself as higher than Crystal Palace. He wants to be at a team that's not selling their best players. And he's possibly earned that right, Chris. And this isn't just a one-trick pony. I mean, he won the Europa League with Frankfurt when nobody expected Frankfurt to win it. So very, very astute, shrewd manager. And Crystal Palace have just got to enjoy this experience and hope they can convince them to stay beyond this season, because we know there's a lot of top teams struggling. You look at Liverpool, you look at Man United, you look at Spurs. All these teams will be looking at an Oliver Glasner profile type manager. But fascinating game. Man United, Chris, you just don't know what you're going to get. You think they've turned a corner, 5 unbeaten. Everton at home, you think Monday night, perfect. Old Trafford, go and make it 6 unbeaten, go and 1, and they turn up and play like that. And they do remind you a bit of Spurs. Now, Man United have become the new Spurs, I think. You think when they've turned a corner that, no, they hit you right on the nose. United for years under Ferguson were such a consistent team. You knew what you were going to get. I was speaking to a lot of Man United fans, and they were saying, I think we're finally starting to see Amram's system work, and we're getting on the right path. And Everton at home, that should be an R1. And they go and perform like that against 10 men, and the manager either completely neglected it, or if he didn't see it, that's an even bigger concern. But I was actually shouting at the TV, manager's got to change this. 3 at the back's not working. Everton have everybody back behind the ball in the second half. 3 centre halves on the halfway line, marking nobody. It was the perfect time to just pivot away to a back 4, get another attacking player on, try something different, and he didn't. And I think that's a massive concern for Man United fans, that Amram, even when it was clear the back 3 wasn't needed against Everton in that second half, he persisted with and made like-for-like changes. It was complete madness.
Do you have confidence, Gareth, in him, at Ruben Amorim? Do you have confidence in him turning it around?
No, I think Monday night was possibly the beginning of the end. I think that was a real negligence of coaching. And I think Gary Neville was trying to be impartial in commentary, but obviously he's a Man United fan, and he was tearing his hair out watching it. He was like, seriously, you can't stick with his back 3. Get Shaw off, get somebody else on that's going to play forward. And they never really threatened Everton. A couple of crosses into the box. Everton were so comfortable. I've never seen a team at Old Trafford with 10 men find it so easy as Everton did. And Amram come out after the game. He's always very honest. And he says, we're nowhere near where Man United should be. And brilliant. He says all the right things, but he's not changing it consistently enough. That was a body blow on Monday night. I couldn't believe what I was watching. Any coach, I mean, I was speaking, one of my best mates is a Man United fan. He coaches with me as well. He coaches an under-13 team, and even he was saying as well, I cannot believe that Amram stuck with that system in that game. He's a blind man, could have told you he had to switch it up, but he's stuck with a back three. And I think he's so stubborn, Chris, that's going to be his downfall. He's refusing to adapt in any game. He wants to play that system. And I just don't think at the top level you can do that. You have to be able to spot and fix and change things up. And he seemed incapable of that on Monday night, because if I can see it, Gary Neville can see it, other people can see it. He's supposed to be a top class manager from Portugal. I'm sure he could see it, but he just doesn't want to do it. And I think that's when you've got such an inflexible manager. We've seen it with Ange, only wanted to play the attacking way. Slot at the minute as well. They're conceding goals, and he takes off midfielders. They put attackers on. Don't know. You need to have a plan B in different ways to win games. And at the minute, Amram seems to be reliant on that back three working.
Certainly inconsistent so far this campaign. Played 12, won 5, drawn 3, lost 4. Scored 19, conceded 19, goal difference of 0, 18 points. But as I mentioned at the start of the stream, these mid-table teams at the moment, it seems to be 3 points above, say, 14th, 15th, and then 3 points away from the top 4. It's a crazy, crazy league table at the moment. So I think it will start shaping up in the next 4, 5, 6 games, certainly. Crystal Palace have won 3 of their last 4 games against Manchester United, drawing 1. As many as they had in their previous 30, winning 3, drawing 6, and losing 21. Manchester United have failed to score in each of their last 4 Premier League games against Crystal Palace. Gareth, what are you going to go for? Do you know what? I'll go first on this one. I think Crystal Palace are going to win this one 1-0.
I'm going to go Crystal Palace 3-1.
Okay. Right. Let's talk about the 2:05 kickoffs. These are strange kickoff times, I must say, this weekend.
I think it's because of the 12 o'clock game. They've given them the extra 5 months for TV, but crazy.
Aston Villa take on Wolves. Wolves, as I mentioned at the start, the only team that haven't won a Premier League game yet. They have played 12. They have drawn 2. They have lost 10. Is there any way that Wolves can stay in the Premier League?
Well, Chris, we spoke about it a few weeks ago that Wolves need to forget about, staying up at the minute. It is still possible because there's a lot of games left, but the confidence in the squad must be so drained at the minute. But I says to you, Wolves need to win their first game and then build towards staying up. Until they won a game, they've just got to forget about relegation and how many points they're behind teams. Won a game. They've got to win that first game. And at the minute, Chris, it looks a million miles off. They look so defeated. Rob Edwards, I think, is going to regret coming back. And the Wolves, I think that was a massive mistake. Yes, we've all got passion for teams, but you have to be professional first. And that could do him more damage than it would have done staying at Middlesbrough. There's no reason he could have managed Wolves on our team down the line. I completely understand when he said, though this job might never come up again, they manage my team that I love. But you've got to be smart. And we often hear about managers, Chris, when they take a job and they maybe it doesn't work out, they say, I rushed into that or I made the wrong decision. And I think Rob Edwards will regret this decision because I think he could do himself more harm than good in this role. I think Wolves are doomed. But, that Derby record of 11 points Derby must be thinking we might be able to shake off that tag as the worst ever Premier League team, because Wolves, if they won at least 2 games, you feel maybe even 3, they match Derby, and that's going to be very, very tough at the moment. But I don't see them ending this streak at the weekend. I think Aston Villa will win this very, very comfortably.
Yeah, I completely agree, actually. They've won their last 3 Premier League games as well, beating City, beating Bournemouth, and beating Leeds United 2-1 away. Aston Villa have won their last 2 home league games against Wolves, having won just one of their previous 9 against them at Villa Park, drawing 5 and losing 3. I think it's going to be a comfortable Aston Villa win, actually. I'm going to go 3-0. Aston Villa at the moment are sitting in 4th in the table, played 12, won 6, drawn 3, lost 3. They've got 21 points. They're only 2 points away from second spot. Where do you see Aston Villa finishing this season?
Strange one, because they had a very, very difficult start to the season, didn't they? And we were worried about Emery and the lifespan of his teams maybe as around this time. But no, they've responded really, really well, and you have to give the manager credit. He's found a way to get them back to where they were, and it looks at the minute like they're going to be pushing for a top 4 spot. I mean, I think they're going to be very, very comfortable in Europa League up until a certain point. I think they can get away with not playing their best players in the groups in the league phase because they're so comfortable. I think they're sitting 3rd, but they're level with the team on top with 12 points out of 15. So they're basically qualified for the next round. So I think Villa could be one of those teams that has a very good end of the year. And coming new year now, they'll be pushing for a top 4 spot. So and this game is just a very similar to you, comfortable one. I'm going to go 2-0 Aston Villa.
Gareth, there's a question here from Dennis. All we hear about this season is set pieces. Teams need to work on blocking shots from outside the box. What's your opinion on this?
Well, Thomas Frank done an interview, didn't he, when he was a Brentford manager, about he doesn't believe in his own team shooting from outside the box because he's done all the homework, all the stats, and this is, I mean, it's not rocket science. Most shots from outside the box tend to go over the bar or wide, or the keeper saves them. So he's right in a way, but it doesn't mean you completely neglect defending them, because you give someone like Vitinha time and space in the edge of the box, he'll pick his spot. So you have to almost play the opponent of who you're playing against. How many goals do they score from outside the box? That is a problem position at the moment for Spurs. They're conceding too many goals from outside the box, or on the around the edge of the box, because they're not putting enough pressure on the ball because they're so worried about a cross coming in. So that is something that maybe Thomas Frank and his team's overlooking at the moment. But that's got to change. We can't keep giving teams shots from outside the box. I mean, Morgan Rogers picked his spot at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I was at that game. No pressure on the ball. Puts it in the top corner. You've got to close them down. You've got to get somebody out there, because if somebody's running at you, one, it might hit them, or two, it'll put them off. And we don't seem to do that at the moment. So I agree with Dennis that there seems to be an overemphasis at Spurs on defending the box, attacking the box, set pieces. Don't seem to be too worried about open play. And let me tell you, from a coach's point of view, open play is your bread and butter. That's where you create winning teams. What you do with the ball when you have it, and how you defend off the ball, and you know what I mean, and keep them. You want to keep people away from your box, not invite them on. It's almost like Thomas Frank feels we've got enough physical players in there and tall players that, don't worry, if a cross comes in, we can deal with it. No, Thomas, you've got to make sure you're keeping people away from the box. And the best way to keep people away from the box is winning the ball high up in the top end of the pitch. And Spurs aren't doing that enough at the moment.
Gareth, right, the Aston Villa v Wolves game, I've gone for a 3-0 home win. What are you going to go for?
Yeah, 2-0 Aston Villa.
Right, next up, Nottingham Forest take on Brighton at the City Ground. I must say, what a job Sean Dyche has done since taking over from Ange Postecoglou. Of course, his short time at the City Ground. 3 wins in their last 3 games in all competitions, 2 draws before that. What has he changed? What are the main things that Sean Dyche has gone in there and changed?
Well, the one thing before I say that, Chris, is there's certain managers that fit certain clubs and certain styles, and Sean Dyche is a typical Nottingham Forest. I mean, you couldn't. It's a match made in heaven. You know, he's very similar to a Nuno, type of manager that he's not too fussed on being, playing expansive stuff, being difficult to beat. But if you look at that game against Liverpool, and you look at the Arsenal and Spurs game, the difference in the two, Nottingham Forest had a plan when they got the ball. They had a clear plan of when we get the ball on the transition, how do you break Liverpool down and expose them. Spurs didn't do that. The Arsenal, they had no idea when they got the ball how we're going to get the ball forward now. It was just get it away from goal, and that was the difference. And Sean Dyche is a very underrated manager. He's very good at getting the best, but like a Harry Redknapp in a different style. Harry Redknapp was very good at getting the best out of attacking players. I think Sean Dyche is very good at getting teams very well organised and maximising their skills and weaknesses. And I think He's done a very good job at Burnley for a number of years. He's done a very good job at Everton, and he's going to do a very, very good job at Forest. He's basically what you would categorise as a stiff pair of hands, isn't he? And Forest obviously made a mistake with Ange. Like I say, fits and stuff, and Ange was never a fit for Nottingham Forest. It was never going to work playing the football that he wants to play. Ange is better suited to Borussia Dortmund and Ajax, where they're one of the stronger teams in their league, and they can go and play that expansive style like he did at Celtic. And that doesn't make him a bad manager. I mean, he won the Europa League with Spurs, and a lot of managers had those opportunities and they weren't able to do it with better players like Kane and so on. So you have to give him credit for that. But I just think Sean Dyche is just a very, very, very clever and organised coach. And he's a very likeable man. And I think that's really, really important. I think when he's got a personality about him, Chris, and when you listen to these press conferences and these interviews after the game and the way he is with the players and all, I can just imagine being quite a very fun environment. Yes, work hard, organisations there, but I can kind of think he's probably the type of lad you wouldn't mind going to the pub with. He probably have a bit of crack and a bit of banter, and I think players like that, Chris. My worry about Thomas Frank at the minute, can you see him having those kind of relationships with the players at Spurs and it being like fun and stuff? I don't see that with him. I think he's a very nice man, but I don't see that kind of fun element of it. And I mean, the reason I get on a load of my players, they're young, but I make the sessions quite fun for them and have a bit of crack with them. And it doesn't matter if you're 8, 9, 18, 19, 27, 28. Everybody wants to have fun and enjoy themselves whilst winning games. And I think Sean Dyche has just made that, under Ange, the players were, there's a lot of negativity around the appointment. That didn't help. I think Sean Dyche went in and there was a lot of love for Sean Dyche because he was previously at Forest, and, teams had the record of a Premier League proven manager of, navigating through difficult spells with teams. And I just think it was a brilliant, brilliant appointment. And it doesn't surprise me that they're doing well. I fancied them last week to get a result at Anfield. Didn't fancy them, they won 3-0. But you could see that he would have a plan for Liverpool, and he executed it absolutely brilliantly, and the players executed it. And that's the sign of a good manager, Chris. The communication to the players. The players knew exactly what to do, and they knew the roles with and without the ball. And look, it was an attractive watch. Yes, Forest were compact at times, but when they got the ball, they were dangerous. And you've got to have that balance. And at the minute, Forest have that perfect balance. They go and play Malmo on Thursday night in the Europa League, beating 3-0 at home, playing a different style of football. So, no, it's going well, Forest, and I think Brighton will be in for a tough game on Sunday.
Well, Brighton are unbeaten their last 3 Premier League games, beating Leeds United 3-0 at home, drawing Selhurst Park against Crystal Palace 0-0, and most recently beating Brentford at home 2-1. Gareth, can you remember what the scoreline was in this fixture last season?
Yeah.
7-0.
It was 7th heaven for Nottingham Forest. Chris Wood got a hat-trick, and at that point, Forest looked nailed on for top 4. I think it was in February time. I think after that, they never really got going again, Forest. I think they had a couple of results here and there, but that was kind of the start of the downfall for whatever happened. And then I think Brighton got beat 7-0, and then they went and won the next week. It was a very funny, just one of those games. Brighton had a nightmare, and Forest, everything they had went done. I don't expect it to be the same in this game, of course, but I do fancy Forest they won again, Chris.
Yeah. I'm going to go 1-1. What are you going to go for?
I'm going to go 2-1 Forest.
Wow. Right. Next up at the London Stadium, West Ham United host Liverpool. Ooh. Now, Liverpool at the moment are now down to 12. They have played 12. They have won 6. They have lost 6. They haven't drawn a game yet. They have scored 18. They have conceded 20. Liverpool at the moment, the champions, have a goal difference of -2. They have 18 points. They are a staggering 11 points off league leaders Arsenal right now, and are only 7 points away from the relegation zone. This is not what we expected from Liverpool.
No, I don't think anyone expected it. I mean, you're trying to put your finger on where it all went wrong for Liverpool, because, yeah, they won their first 5 games in the league. I think they won their first 7 in all competitions.
Do you know, Gareth? Do you know? Let me just say, I absolutely love the tweet, and I had to check whether it was an official tweet, or whether it was these fake ones where Newcastle, quoted the tweet and said, stop asking for your money back for Isak. That was funny.
Yeah, I seen the one that somebody put up. Watford have sacked.
That one as well.
Somebody had to. Yeah, they're getting bantered at the minute, and it's not usual. Liverpool are a banter team. They're usually a team that everyone's jealous of. But yeah, you're trying to put your finger on where it all went wrong. But Chris, in those first 7 wins in all competitions that they were very fortunate. They won most of them. They were struggling in those games. They had a bit of luck on their side, a couple of last-minute winners, and just seemed right from the off that the balance wasn't right in the team. Too many attacking players, too many, having to play midfielders at fullback. And ironically, they've now had fullbacks injured and they've had to play midfielders there, but he was trying to overcomplicate it. And in the end, he's not getting the best out of the players he's brought in. Wirtz hasn't worked. Isak's been, I don't know, the team injured. That's not worked. Ekitike started well, but he's faded. Salah looks so far off it. Van Dijk looks like it's a year too far for him. And Kanate has been nothing short of a disgrace. Whether he's down tools because he wants it, he's moving on. Next year, his contract up. I don't know, but it seems to be there's so many problems there, Chris, and the manager looks, don't want to sound disrespectful, but he looks out of his depth. He looks like he has no answer to this slut that they're on. This absolute crisis of 9 losses and 12 in all competitions.
But they're champions. How long does a club give a manager that has just won the Premier League for them? Because surely you've got credit in the bank. I mean, you're not.
All the reports that we're hearing, Chris, is his credit in the bank has got him this far over the last couple of weeks, and that this next week is going to be pivotal. I think they've got West Ham away, Sunderland at home on Wednesday night, and they finish with Leeds away the following Saturday. So you look at those 3 opponents. Yes, West Ham have turned a bit of a corner, but they've been struggling for most of the season. Sunderland at home is a newly promoted team, and Leeds away another newly promoted team who are the managers under pressure there. If he was to lose all 3 or even 2 of those, I think his position, a bit like we spoke about with Thomas Frank, would become untenable. I think last season will be almost forgotten about. That, I was speaking to a Liverpool colleague of mine. He says, if we lose these next 3 games, we're talking about a relegation battle because we can't stop conceding goals. He says to me, it's not just we're losing games. He says we're losing 3-0, 3-0, 4-1. He says we're getting absolutely smashed. And he says we're having to score at least 3, if not 4 every week just to get a result. And that is just not sustainable at any level. So, and the biggest problem the manager's got at the minute, he's only got Kanate and Van Dijk. He's got no other centre-halves fit. He's got no right-back fit. So he has to continue with a midfielder there. Salah, is he going to drop him? He's got no real alternative there on that side. Nobody can play in that position. So, I don't know how much you can actually change. They've got the summer window so wrong in terms of the balance of the squad. They bought so many attacking players that can't seem to play together and also need time to adjust to the league. Yes, they've had a couple of injuries to Alex Isak, but they've not signed any defenders. And that was a problem position last year, because if you think back to the League Cup final against Newcastle, that was when the bad run started on. They lost to PSG in the Champions League over 2 games. They lost to Newcastle in the League Cup final. And their league form kind of waned a bit towards the end. Yes, they won it comfortably, but they were so far clear that you could start to see the signs of a team that, maybe they were just on a wave and they were winning games, and Salah was scoring all those goals, and they were winning a lot of games 2-1 last year. And, no 2 seasons are ever the same, but it just looks like with Salah and Van Dijk, 2 world-class players have become 2 very normal players now. And the issue that you've got with those 2, yes, they're unbelievable players, but we've seen this set on with Heung-min Son, Chris. I think when you're at that age and you start to have a dip, it's very difficult to get back to the world-class level that you were at. We started to see Son dip after that year he won the Golden Boot. Salah won the Golden Boot last year by a million miles, and then that following season, it took Son, I think he got the hat-trick against Leicester, but it took him about 8 games to score a goal, and he never really ever got back to the Heung-min Son that won the Golden Boot. And you just wonder if Salah's lost that superhuman power. Van Dijk seems to have lost a bit of pace, and he's also playing against a centre-back that's having a crisis of confidence in Kanate. So I think the problems are all there, and West Ham couldn't be hitting Liverpool at a better time, and Liverpool could arguably not be hitting West Ham at a worse time. They've won 2 games, 2-0 up against Bournemouth, still got a good draw at Bournemouth. So they're unbeaten in 3 games, coming in this with confidence. You looked at this game 5 or 6 weeks ago and think, oh my God, West Ham, were they going to get a result? But West Ham probably going as favourites. Well, would it be right in saying that?
I've written down 1-0 West Ham. So that says it all, doesn't it? You're absolutely right. And it's funny, a couple of weeks ago, I was speaking to some West Ham fans, and I said, Nuno Espirito Santo will get you out of this mess. You will not be relegated. And they looked at me and went, no, we're going down. And I was like, no, you're not. Nuno will sort you out. And I tell you what, when you talk about those results, their last 3 Premier League results, beating Newcastle 3-1 at home, beating Burnley 3-2 at home. You've got to be winning games like that. They're unlucky not to win at Bournemouth last time out, getting a 2-2 draw. But when we look at Liverpool and you talk about the goals that they're conceding, you're absolutely right, Gareth, because even in the League Cup, they lost 3-0 at home against Crystal Palace at Anfield. They are not used to losing games at Anfield so convincingly anyway.
It's the worst Liverpool run since the 1950s, and they've lost 3 consecutive games at Anfield by 3 goals or more.
But it's funny, isn't it? Because they then came back for the international break. They beat Aston Villa 2-1, and then they beat Real Madrid at Anfield 1-0. And then, as you've mentioned, the last 3 games in all competitions, they lost 3-0 away at Man City. They lost 3-0 at home against Forest. And, of course, last time out, losing 4-1 at home against PSV. So they've actually shipped 10 goals in the last 3 games.
Yeah, at Anfield as well. Crazy. Yeah.
So I'm going to go for a 1-0 West Ham win. What are you going to go for?
2-1 West Ham.
Wow. See what has happened. Yeah. It'd be interesting.
I think if West Ham do win this game, oh my God, the pressure on Slot going to at Anfield again on Wednesday night against Sunderland. I mean, that would be must win. I think if he was to lose to West Ham and Sunderland turned him over, I don't even think he would see Leeds on the Saturday. I think he would be removed from his post on the Thursday morning, probably.
But when we talk about managers, Gareth, it is, we've sort of brushed over it, but Nuno, what a job he has done since going in there, because like you also said a couple of weeks ago, you'd never be predicting this result.
Yeah, but again, we spoke about just a manager fitting the club like a glove, and Nuno was that type of manager for this type of West Ham. Will he be the right fit for West Ham next year? If they go out and sign a few attacking players and they want to play more expansive, probably not. But for this season, they've got a manager that's very good at getting teams organised and getting them out of a mess. And for this year, yes, I'm sure West Ham will be fine.
Gareth, what a game we end with. Chelsea against Arsenal. Of course, this one, Chelsea are currently second. They've got 23 points from the opening 12 games. Arsenal are league leaders at the moment, 29 points from the opening 12 games. Arsenal have only lost 1 game. Are Chelsea title contenders? Let's start with that one. And if Arsenal do win this game, is it all over?
Yeah, 2 very good questions. I think if Chelsea won this game, you have to consider them as title contenders. And I think I was about to say, if Arsenal won this game, I think it's curtains. I think they're too far clear. They don't look like a team that's going to drop enough points for all our teams. All our teams look more likely to drop points than them. And they've been dealing with injuries. I mean, they've lost Gabriel and nothing's happened. They've lost Odegaard, nothing's happened. Declan Rice is probably the other one that would there be a drop off there? I'm not sure. I think at the minute they've got so many guns and they've got so much strength and depth that, even in the Champions League, they're blowing teams away. I mean, Bayern Munich were seen as, the biggest contenders, the European in Europe this year, and Arsenal blew them away in that second half on Wednesday night. So worrying for Spurs fans watching that too, that this just doesn't look like an Arsenal team that could, won the league. They could maybe go on and win the Champions League as well. Our Arteta prioritises 1. If it gets tight, could be interesting, but massive game, because Chelsea could win this and be 3 points behind Arsenal, and Cole Palmer's still to come back into the team. I believe Maresca says today Palmer's ready for the weekend, so that's a big boost. But I think in a way it's probably helped Chelsea that Palmer's got injured, because I think they relied on him so much. He's been out for so long, they've actually found a way now to cope without him. And I think Palmer coming back and only adds to the strength. I mean, I spoke about him at the start of the season as one of my players to watch was Esteval. I mean, this kid looks phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. They were all talking about Lamine Yamal before the game, and there was a new name on everyone's lips after the game. It was Esteval. It was all about Esteval on Tuesday night at Stamford Bridge. Ran Barcelona ragged. What is he, 17 years age, 18 years age? What a talent they've got there, Chelsea. And I think when you've got a player like that, he can win you a game on his own. So I think with Palmer coming back, Chelsea have an extra layer to them now. And this is definitely Arsenal's biggest test of the season so far. They're hitting a Chelsea team that's banging form, not relying on a Cole Palmer, scoring goals. One issue you've got with Chelsea is they've got mistakes in them. and the goalkeeper doesn't fill you with a lot of confidence. But I do think they can get a result in this game. Arsenal have had a tough week as well. North London derby, still a big game emotionally for them. Bayern Munich at home was another big game. So, maybe it'll be a good time to play him. Maybe it'll be the third game and maybe a game too many. And they may be a little bit off it. So, big game, but Chelsea nearly won. I think even a draw here for Arsenal is a great result.
They've both had really good weeks, though, Gareth. I hate to say it, but yeah, of course, Arsenal beating Spurs in the fashion, the manner that they did last Sunday. And then, of course, brushing aside Bayern Munich, keeping Harry Kane extremely quiet. Chelsea, last week, you mentioned it earlier about them beating Burnley at Turf Moor 2-0. And then Barcelona, brushing them aside 3-0 at Stamford Bridge. Did you expect that sort of performance and result against Barcelona?
I think Barcelona have their vulnerabilities. We've seen that last year against Inter Milan, the Champions League semi-final. Conceded 7 goals over the 2 games. Seen it against PSG a few weeks ago when they were 1-0 up and they tried to get another goal and they were caught and they were beat 2-1. They play a very high line, possibly the highest line I've ever seen in football. I think it's one of those that has to be perfection to get it right. They do catch teams offside at times, but they give up so many chances, Chris. I just can't see a Barcelona team like that one in the Champions League. I think there's too many astute, clever managers that'll find ways around that. Yes, it's brilliant to watch. I mean, if somebody gave me a ticket anywhere in the world and I couldn't go and watch Spurs, I'd go and watch Barcelona at the minute because you're guaranteed goals, you're guaranteed end-to-end football, basketball style. But is that going to get them success in the Champions League? I don't see it. I think Maresca was very, very clever. And I think the Chelsea fans are warming to Maresca. I think he is prone to the odd mistake. But you have to remember, this is his first full-time job at this level. He managed Leicester before that in the Championship. But he's probably learning on the role. I mean, he made that mistake against Man United, didn't he, when he took off players with 10 men and he tried to sit back and they got beat 2-1. But I think he learns from his mistakes quite quickly, and that's what's impressive. And if you look what they did, the Spurs and the attacking play and the way they move the ball at times, there's a very good manager in there, Maresca. And I think Chelsea are on the right path now of improving. I still think they're a bit short at the back. They probably need a top-class goalkeeper. If they address those in the summer, they'll be a real contender next year in the Premier League. I just think this season might be a season too far for them. But if they can go and beat Arsenal, you'd be a fool to write them off.
Well, Chelsea have won just one of their last 11 Premier League games against Arsenal, drawing 3 and losing 7. And a winless in 7, drawing 2 and losing 5 since a 2-0 win at the Emirates back in August 2021. And having lost 6 of their 7 Premier League away games against Chelsea between 2013 and 2018, drawing 1, Arsenal are now unbeaten in their last 6 visits to Stamford Bridge, winning 3 and drawing 3. I'll tell you what, Gareth, before reading those stats out, I was going to go for a 2-1 Chelsea win. I'm going to probably change that. I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw.
Yeah, I'm going to go for a 1-1 draw as well. I think it'll be quite tactical. I don't see both teams being overly expansive. I think it'll be quite cagey. But I think Chelsea have got to score the first goal, Chris, because I don't see this Arsenal team when they get in front are tough not to crack.
Yeah, games like this, important games like this, the fans always get behind the team. And I think their fans will definitely be up for this one, 110%. Gareth, at this stage, all these shows that we do, I always ask you the same question at the end. Who's going to finish in the top 4? Who's going to go down?
Yeah, and it's changing a lot, doesn't it? Because so many teams are not performing. Arsenal are going to want it at a counter by the looks of things. It's going to be a scrap for second, I think, between Man City and Chelsea. I'll just go Man City just purely because of the Haaland factor. If he stays fit, I think they'll finish second, but probably a long way behind Arsenal. So Arsenal, Man City, Chelsea. I still think 4th and 5th is up for grabs for a lot of teams. I think Villa will have a dip at some stage. Newcastle are inconsistent. Spurs, Liverpool are having trouble, but they'll probably get better at some stage. Man United will be in and out because they've only got one game a week. So I think you could pull any team out of a hat there for 4th and 5th. But at the minute, I'd probably go with Aston Villa and Newcastle, because if they sort their way form out, they'll win most of their home games.
And relegation?
Oh, Wolves, Burnley, and Leeds. I've changed my mind on that as well, but I didn't have the original. I didn't have Leeds on there. I don't think, but I'll go with Wolves, Burnley, and Leeds.
Very last question, because we've mentioned a number of managers today. Who do you think will be sacked next as Premier League manager? The next couple of sackings.
I think there's three managers in the running. I think Daniel Farke, Arne Slot, and Thomas Frank. Funny enough, I think Thomas Frank could outlast Slot just because of the treacherous form that they're in. You would fancy. It's funny actually saying this, but you could see Spurs grinding out a result maybe here and there to keep Frank on the job. Maybe like Fulham at the weekend, they might script a 2-1. Liverpool at the minute look incapable of scripting a victory unless they blow a team away. They're conceding that many goals. I know we conceded 9 this week, but that's not really been a fight feature for us. We've kind of been solid enough at the back. And we played against Arsenal and PSG, which you don't play against those quality every week. So I think Farke could go this week if Man City badly beat them. But I think Slot could be quickly behind him and Thomas Frank. I'll go as far as to say Daniel Farke, Arne Slot, and Thomas Frank will not be at their clubs by New Year's Day. I think Frank might last a bit longer, but I don't think he will see the 1st of January.
Gareth, thank you so much as always for your time and talking about the Premier League predictions. Now, do remember everyone, if you're watching on YouTube, on X and on Facebook, get your score predictions in the comments as well. It's good fun. And Gareth, always enjoy our chats. Thank you so much. Enjoy the Premier League weekend. Let's hope that Spurs can get 3 points Saturday night against Fulham and start climbing up that Premier League table again. Because as I mentioned, 3 points away from the top 4 and 3 points above 14th. So we certainly don't want to be slipping down that table anymore. Gareth, enjoy your weekend. Before you do go, where can people find you?
Yeah, thanks for having me on again, Chris. It's always good to do the Premier League preview and the predictions. I'm doing this now since the start of the season, week 13 already. Crazy. But you can find me on your podcast, obviously. I was on the other night. I'll probably be on next week again for the prediction show and have a few games coming up as well after the final whistle goes. You can follow me there on Twitter at Gareth Hotspurs. Mainly Spurs talk on there. So Chris, keep up a great work and thanks very much.
Thank you, mate. Have a great weekend. Thanks to everyone for watching and listening, and enjoy your weekend. And we will see you on the next one. Come on, you Spurs.